What's going on, guys? It's Fantasy Stock Exchange here, and today we're bringing you another mock draft reactions video to the Fantasy Stock Exchange YouTube channel, where we're basically looking at Daniel Jeremiah and Mel Kiper's mock drafts and kind of contextualizing how these landing spots would impact our rookie rankings and how we would kind of view them amongst each other. But before we dive into this video, Corey, how you doing today?
I'm doing good. Yeah. The other benefit of these is we get to an insight on where these guys might go in the draft, because these guys, I would say, are probably the two most plugged in NFL draft analysts out there, and they have an insight of what teams are thinking and what teams are valuing. So we get to look at these guys to get an insight into what the draft capital is for some of these guys. And obviously this changed a little bit since the combine and free agency. Since the last time we did this, obviously the draft order has changed a couple times as well, when we did McShay and Daniel Jeremiah's first mock drafts that we looked over a couple weeks ago. So I'm excited to get into this. As always, if you guys enjoy this video, like, comment, subscribe. 75% of you guys watching these videos not subscribed yet. Don't know why. Totally free. Doesn't cost you anything, and it really helps us out. So we really appreciate that. If you guys want access to our Dynasty rankings, which you're going to be making reference to pretty much throughout this entire video, Patreon link is in the description. Promo code FSE on Underdog Fantasy will get you access to our Dynasty rankings for free for simply using our promo code at sign up and first deposit. But all that being said, let's hit the intro. Okay, so you want to start off with Jeremiah's or Kiper's?
We could do Jeremiah's first, just because we kind of alluded to his first one in that intro and the fact that we actually went over his first one in that intro. So we could talk about the first skill position, the first fantasy relevant player off the board in his mock draft was actually at number 8 overall, with the Atlanta Falcons selecting Garrett Wilson, wide receiver from the Ohio State Buckeyes. What do you take from this landing spot?
Well, I think this is a landing spot we've seen, pretty often so far since the Calvin Ridley news. This has come up quite a bit because he is the most like Calvin Ridley of the top 3 wide receivers. Garrett Wilson going to Atlanta would make a ton of sense. Now, would it be great for his fantasy value in the short term? Probably not. He's dealing with Marcus Mariota as his quarterback. Calvin Ridley is going to be coming back after this season, but Garrett Wilson is a good enough player, a good enough receiver that this would probably propel him down to like 105, 106 in my rankings, but I would still be very, very comfortable taking him there. And my hunch would be that he'd fall to like 107, 108 of the consensus, and you'd get a good value on him in rookie drafts if this were to happen.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this is your quote unquote Calvin Ridley prototype, your speedy, nuanced route runner that can create separation with anybody in the class. That's what Garrett Wilson will represent. So you're talking about him and Kyle Pitts trying to make magic this year. Obviously, Mariota isn't, the most inhibiting of each of their talents, but I mean, we play Dynasty for the long-term game. If Mariota doesn't work out this year, the Falcons are most likely going to be a bad team. The Falcons are most likely going to be a bad team that is already trying to start their rebuild. They could be in good position for a guy like Bryce Young, for a guy like CJ Stroud. So again, if Mariota doesn't work out, I would expect them to attack the quarterback position next offseason in some type of way. And I mean, even if they don't, realistically, Garrett Wilson is enough of a talent to the point where he shouldn't be falling beyond that middle first round of your rookie drafts.
Yeah, exactly. That's the NFL, as we've seen today, or I guess as we're recording this, Tyreek Hill just got traded to the Dolphins.
Yep.
Situation for wide receivers is overrated because it can change pretty quick. And as long as you're a very talented receiver with a good profile like Garrett Wilson, who can command targets like Garrett Wilson, I really don't care where you go in the actual NFL draft, because like you said, within 1 year, we could be talking about Garrett Wilson being tied to an exciting young quarterback, with Calvin Ridley, who's aging on his contract, year or whatever, could sign elsewhere in free agency. It was already rumored that he wanted out of Atlanta before the suspension occurred. And suddenly it's Garrett Wilson and Kyle Pitts and the young quarterback.
Yep, no, for sure. So any closing thoughts on this Garrett Wilson landing spot, or can we move to the New York Jets at 10th overall?
Yeah, we can move to the Jets at 10, and I think the Jets are probably guaranteed to draft a wide receiver at 10. I don't know if I had to put money down on, one team drafting one position with their pick, outside of like number 1 overall, and maybe not even number 1 overall, I think Garrett, or a wide receiver in general, going with one of the Jets' first 2 picks is very, very likely to happen. We already had reports since the Tyreek Hill trade that the Jets were in on Tyreek Hill, and they want to address the wide receiver position. they were not reportedly willing to give up their first round picks, either 4 or 10, for Tyreek Hill. And that's probably because they like this wide receiver class. And they may have still even taken a wide receiver, even if they traded for Tyreek Hill. So with the 10th overall pick, them selecting Drake London gets them a big, physical wide receiver to pair opposite Elijah Moore on the outside. Corey Davis obviously contributes as a number 3 wide receiver, which I think would be a great role for him because we've seen him work better as a tertiary piece than, the number 1 or the number 2 even of an offense. So Drake London going to the Jets, again, another guy that would probably slide down dynasty draft boards for the consensus and for most people. And, whatever wide receiver goes to Green Bay and Kansas City goes ahead of them in rookie drafts. But Drake London, for my money, is the best receiver in this class. And if Drake London goes to the New York Jets, a quarterback who I believe in, quarterback who's on the rise, and a offense that I think is on the rise as well, I think Drake London would be a phenomenal pick in the early first round, mid first round of rookie drafts.
Yeah, no, I fully agree. I think that Drake London has the talent and the opportunity there at 10th overall with the New York Jets. And let's talk about surrounding factors. I mean, I think overall, this addition to that offense, that bona fide number 1 boundary X style type of wide receiver, which Drake London can represent, is the perfect complement to what they're trying to do long term. Obviously, with Elijah Moore occupying that more Z slot type of role, that more, versatile off the line type of wide receiver. So having those two to help Zach Wilson, your 2nd overall pick, the player that you basically invested and mortgaged the franchise on developing for, man, I'm super excited. Again, if the Jets were to actually make this happen, this would be one of my favorite up-and-coming offenses in the entire NFL, especially because they should address line either at 4 or maybe in the 2nd round. Or, I mean, we've seen already a couple free agency moves on that regard. I mean, this is an up-and-coming team, an up-and-coming offense. And once LaFleur kind of has those pieces at hand, his extra wide receiver, that franchise quarterback is going to be able to take the leap. And as a result, I mean, Zach Wilson is going to be one of the biggest winners from draft night if Drake London were to land in New York.
Yeah, can you imagine if they take like Ike Ekwonu at 4 and Drake London at 10 or something
Beautiful.
like that? It'd be a phenomenal move, which I believe Daniel Jeremiah actually does have them taking an offensive lineman at 4. Or no, sorry, he has them taking Sauce Gardner at 4, which, I mean, would still help Zach Wilson because you get a playmaking secondary piece that can get you the ball back on defense as well. But moving on to the next pick, we have Kenny Pickett going 18th overall to the New Orleans Saints. Now, if you guys watched the Kenny Pickett Tale of the Tape, which would have been on the channel yesterday, you would have heard me say that the New Orleans Saints is the ideal landing spot for Kenny Pickett because Kenny Pickett, the type of quarterback that he is, he needs schemed, specific, easy throws where he can use his athleticism, use his ability in play action and stuff to get outside the pocket, because Kenny Pickett is not a perfect quarterback prospect. And also the biggest factor for Kenny Pickett being a great fit in New Orleans is that of the quarterback needy teams, New Orleans has the best offensive line. Maybe obviously losing Teron Armstead hurts, but they still have, Eric McCoy and Ryan Ramczyk and other great pieces on that line. And the fact that Kenny Pickett could go, 6 to Carolina or 8 to Atlanta or 9 to Seattle or something, or 20 to Pittsburgh, with all these teams having horrible offensive lines, would be very, very bad for his fantasy value. I already talked about him yesterday, being that I wouldn't really want to take this guy with a 1st round rookie pick, even in Superflex leagues. But if he goes to New Orleans, the back of the 1st is where I would start to consider him.
Yeah, for sure. And again, I'm not sure if either of these mocks were made prior to Jameis Winston's resigning. So maybe obviously with the news of the re-signing, this is a lot less likely to happen. But if Kenny Pickett were to land with the Saints, obviously you would have, Jameis Winston set in there as that short-term bridge type of quarterback. And you're hoping, by year 2, maybe into that Winston deal, that Pickett can sort of take over either during the season or maybe usurp some before the season. And talk about landing spot. I mean, Michael Thomas, no-brainer. Alvin Kamara, no-brainer. Still an above-average offensive line despite losing Teron Armstead. I mean, this is the perfect quote-unquote nest that you would want for a guy with Kenny Pickett, because you don't want him to have to make every, play out of structure. You don't want him to have to rely upon, brute arm strength to make plays down the field. You want him in a system that's going to be able to get the ball over his hands quickly and get the ball to his playmakers, which, I mean, the Saints are one of the best systems in that regard in the entire NFL.
Yeah, even without Sean Payton, they've been good in that regard. So let's go on to the next pick. This one, I do think this team and this player make a ton of sense mixed together. You get Jamison Williams, an Alabama Crimson Tide member, back with Mac Jones, who obviously wasn't actually at Alabama when Jamison Williams was there, but 2 Alabama Crimson Tide people, linking up. Jamison Williams going 21st overall. Again, this is very important to the insight of what NFL teams are thinking, because Jamison Williams, coming off of a torn ACL, we're kind of, in limbo. Is he going to go in the top 20 of the draft, the first round, the early second round because of the injury? I do think it is very likely this is the range where Jameson Williams hears his name called. And this would add an element to the Patriots offense that they really haven't had since Brandon Cooks back in 2017 with Tom Brady. And Mac Jones and Jameson Williams could finally have a deep element to that offense. They tried it with Nelson Aguilar last year. Wasn't all that effective. You have the underneath guys with Myers and Bourne and, Hunter Henry and the tight ends and the running backs, but you need a field stretcher, and Jameson Williams would honestly, I think this is a great landing spot for Jameson Williams. If he landed in New England, this would be a good spot for his fantasy stock.
Yeah, no, I fully agree on that regard when it comes to Jameson Williams. I mean, people just, there's a lot of people that just think, oh, you need a speed element to your offense. You just add a guy who runs a 4.3 or less, and you instantly have that deep speed. Like, no, like teams know what you're doing. If you're just throwing some bum that can run fast at wide receiver out there, they're not going to adjust their game plan unless that fast wide receiver is a legitimate, star level type of player, which I do think Jameson Williams can transition to. So if he lands in this spot, I mean, this is huge for Mac Jones. This is huge for Jameson Williams. This is huge for that entire offense, having a legitimate star level threat that could also stretch the defense.
Yeah, exactly. I think Mac Jones would see a big time upgrade in his overall weekly ceiling, because we didn't last year. Mac Jones had a couple ceiling games here and there, but they were mainly on the back of, throwing 3 touchdowns. He didn't have a whole lot of passing yardage output. And I think having a guy who can, create a lot after the catch and get downfield and stuff like Jameson Williams can do would really, really help Mac Jones from a ceiling and a weekly ceiling standpoint.
Yeah. And speaking of getting downfield and a guy that loves throwing it down the field, man, imagine Chris Olave going to the Green Bay Packers.
Yeah. So, I mean, right away, the thing that stands out to me is how do you rank these wide receivers knowing where they're going to go, right? Because we have Garrett Wilson in Atlanta, Drake London in New York, and Chris Olave going to Green Bay. I think most casual players would take Chris Olave over those two guys because Chris Olave went with Aaron Rodgers and a system that, has a lot of target competition open with Devontae Adams now gone for Las Vegas. I personally would still take the better prospects over Chris Olave, but Chris Olave would definitely, solidify himself at bare minimum as like a 107, 108 type of pick in Superflex drafts with this type of landing spot.
Yeah, I mean, I fully agree, and it would be an absolute thrill to watch that happen. And I mean, we'll go over the Green Bay landing spot again in just a bit because there's actually another wide receiver that Jeremiah had pegging going to the Packers with both of their first round picks. But I mean, you mentioned Olave with Aaron Rodgers. That's clearly an uptick in his value. Although, as we kind of mentioned, you want to move him up with thin tier. You don't want to move him up into that next tier unless, of course, one of those top guys got like an irrecoverable type of landing spot, which I don't think either of them or any of them are in that case.
Yeah, for sure. This next one is really interesting because
really
I have never seen this team mocked a first round wide receiver up until this point in the draft cycle. And it's March 23rd as we're recording this.
Yep.
I have never seen Arizona mocked a first round wide receiver, but Daniel Jeremiah has Arizona taking Treylon Burks. Now, on the surface, it actually makes a lot of sense. DeAndre Hopkins is an aging wide receiver. Is AJ Green still under contract there? I don't even know. If he is, he's pretty washed. So even if he is there, you could use some youth into that system. And Rondale Moore has always been more of the gadget type of player anyway. So I think Treylon Burks would make a ton of sense in Arizona. I actually do like this landing spot quite a bit.
Oh, man, this would be fun. I mean, this is basically Cliff saying, oh, I see what you're doing with A.J. Brown over in Tennessee. Let's have some fun over here in Arizona because that's
you got a good look at Deebo Samuel this year, too. So that would make a ton of sense as well. Plus, your offense is probably the smallest height offense in the entire league. So you get yourself some size.
Some size. And I mean, this is a guy that I'm pretty sure was clocked in at about 22 miles per hour this year. So that just kind of goes to show you that, yeah, maybe he didn't run, the most exciting 40 at the combine, but this is a guy with legitimate game breaking type of speed, especially for his size when you're talking about just speed score element. I mean, this is an absolute freak of nature on film.
Yeah. So in terms of, does that conversation change at all with Treylon Burks in Arizona? Does Treylon Burks supersede Garrett Wilson and Drake London as the wide receiver one among those top 3 guys in Arizona for you?
He's already my one. So the fact that he also gets, in my opinion, the best landing spot of the bunch, he would be my 102 in this theoretical that Malik Willis is not going round 1.
Yeah, which is an interesting part of this mock draft is that Daniel Jeremiah does not have Malik Willis going in the first round at all, which to me is interesting. Number one, because I
Very.
think if Pittsburgh was on the board at 20, they would absolutely take Malik Willis, like no questions asked. And number two, this did come out before Malik Willis's pro day on Tuesday. And I think he solidified himself not only as a first round pick, but probably a top 10 pick
Yeah.
after his pro day. So I don't know if Daniel Jeremiah just like forgot to put him in the first round, but like that's the only explanation I can come up with. Or maybe he's hearing something that we don't know. Maybe teams are lower on Malik Willis, and this like generated Malik Willis as a top 10 pick is all, media generated. It has nothing to do with the NFL teams. But I mean, our friend Cody Carpentier over at Player Profiler was talking to Matt Rule at Malik Willis's pro day yesterday. And he asked Matt Rule, are you going to take Malik Willis at 6? And Matt Rule said, I don't even know if he's going to be there as his response. So, I mean, there's a chance that Malik Willis goes 2. There's apparently a chance, according to Daniel Jeremiah, that he doesn't go in the first round, period.
Well, I know for a fact after that throw at his pro day, I mean, it showed like the camera going along the sideline, and there's just like a grinning Mike Tomlin in the background. Like, again, like if he somehow even made it to 20, which I think is unlikely at this point, like there's no way in hell Pittsburgh would pass him, in my opinion. But I mean, obviously Daniel Jeremiah is a lot more plugged in than we are, and again, maybe he just forgot to write Malik,
which Wilson. I don't think is likely because this is his job, and he gets a lot of criticism if he doesn't put him in here. But
I mean,
let's move on to the next pick, which
this is the 101.
This is the 101. If this happens, like there is not even close. Especially Malik Willis not going in the first round. Even if Malik Willis went second overall to Detroit, I would still pick Breece Hall 101. If Breece Hall went to the Buffalo fucking Bills and he was tied to Josh Allen in that offense, that would be a phenomenal fit. And I do think this is possible. We have heard in recent days, I've seen a couple reports on Twitter that Breece Hall is getting late first round buzz, and late first round picks that need a running back. Up until Leonard Fournette re-signed with Tampa Bay was definitely in range for that pick. But now that Leonard Fournette has re-signed, it's really Buffalo, and that's pretty much it. That could use a first round running back. And Buffalo has kind of messed around with Singletaries and Zach Moss, and they almost tried to bring in J.D. McKissick. I think they want a stud. If they had a stud running back, it would be an element of their offense that they've been missing. Now, I don't necessarily think it's the thing that gets them over the hump and into the Super Bowl, but I do think that Breece Hall would be a huge contributor to that team. And obviously from a fantasy perspective, we would be drooling if this happened.
Theoretical right here. Breece Hall lands in Buffalo. He's a top blank pick, 15, 20, or 25. What would you say? In a startup?
I think you can make the real argument that Breece Hall versus DeAndre Swift is like the RB3 off the board. I think that's probably about where he would go in drafts. I think, Javonte Williams probably still goes ahead of him. Jonathan Taylor still goes ahead of him. But DeAndre Swift, Najee Harris, and Breece Hall, which is where we already kind of view Breece Hall, would absolutely be the conversation in a startup, top 12, top 15 or so pick.
Maybe I'm crazy, but I think I would put Javonte into that argument as well.
Yeah, I mean, it all depends what Gordon does still as well. But if Gordon is back in Denver and Breece Hall,
even if
Buffalo,
he isn't,
I have no idea, or I have no qualms taking Breece Hall over him.
Well, I mean, even if he isn't, I mean, we look at the peripherals of a Breece Hall. We look at the athletic profile. We look at the offensive proficiency of a Buffalo Bills offense. I mean, there's going to be scoring opportunity on end here. He's clearly shown himself to be capable in the receiving game, which you can't really say about either of the other Buffalo running backs realistically since they've been in the NFL with Singletary and Moss. So, I mean, overall, what's stopping this guy from being like a locked and loaded 20 to 22 touch per game workhorse?
Right, and this is a guy that holds the FBS record for consecutive games with a touchdown going to an offense with a top 3 quarterback in the NFL. Like, this dude would legitimately be a 20 touchdown threat his rookie season.
Yeah. He'd be a first-round redraft pick.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
which is wild. So if that happens, I mean, I think we could speak for every fantasy player on planet Earth when I would say that this would be a phenomenal home run pick for fantasy. How much is it going to help the actual Buffalo Bills? We wouldn't know, but from a fantasy perspective, we would love to see Breece Hall in Western New York. So Green Bay, final pick of the fantasy relevant players of the first round would be Jahan Dotson, wide receiver from Penn State, going to the Green Bay Packers. Could the Packers double up at wide receiver in the first round? I doubt it. I don't think they would take 2 wide receivers, but if they don't re-sign, MVS or any other receivers that are in free agency and they wanted to go for 2 young guys, I don't think this is an insane move. And I think Jahan Dotson is the type of receiver that Aaron Rodgers would like, a guy that can get open, guy that can, be where he's supposed to be. And Chris Olave, the guy that they took earlier in this mock also kind of fits that description.
Yeah, the only gripe I would have is if they took Olave at 22, why they wouldn't go for a more like X style type of wide
Pickens
receiver,
or
bigger
Watson or something.
Pickens or
Yeah.
Watts. Yeah, just from a size element. But I mean, if they're trying to add an identity to their offense, I could see them because I mean, Chris Olave and Jahan Dotson are relatively similar in how they win. So I mean, if they want to go for that style of offense, just guys that can get open, guys that can be dependable, then who knows? Because at the end of the day here, we know Aaron Rodgers, if he can't trust you, he's not throwing you the ball.
Yeah, exactly. And the type of offense that they run is, timing, rhythm based play action, that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
does favor receivers that are going to get open and get open quick. So I do think that's a good fit. So that's the end of Jeremiah's mock. Again, Malik Willis not going in the first round is the biggest surprise that I see here. I'm not really sure what the rationale is behind that. Only one quarterback period going in the first round as well. Just Kenny Pickett, who I think is definitely not the best quarterback in this class if you saw yesterday's video. So Mel Kiper's mock. Obviously, we will see Malik Willis off the board in this one, but the first pick is, we don't need to spend too much time on it because it is the same team, just not the same pick number. 4th overall, the New York Jets taking Drake London. He was going 10th overall in the Jeremiah mock, but 4th overall draft capital for Drake London. He'd firmly be my wide receiver one. You get top 5 draft capital at wide receiver. It's very, very, indicative of Jamar Chase, Calvin Johnson types.
Yeah, and again, the difference in draft capital here, obviously, in the other one, Treylon Burks landed in Arizona at 23 versus 10. It's a little more feasible to make an argument for Treylon Burks because of the landing spot, but you can't argue 4th overall versus, as we'll get into, where Treylon Burks landed in terms of draft capital difference. If the Jets are picking this guy 4th overall, the Jets are envisioning this guy being a locked and loaded 150 plus target per season type of receiver for them.
Yeah, exactly. So we already kind of talked about the fit. We don't
Yeah.
need to rehash that. Garrett Wilson, also the pick at 8 to Atlanta. Again,
Same
this
exact.
is going to be a very popular mock draft pick for a lot of people. If the Falcons don't go quarterback, they're probably going to go receiver, if I had to guess. Maybe they, Kyle Hamilton slides to them or Kayvon Thibodeau slides to them or something like that, and they want to go with the best, more important position in like an edge rusher or an offensive tackle or something. But I do think Garrett Wilson to the Falcons at 8 makes a ton of sense. Number 16, Chris Olave to the Philadelphia Eagles. This one makes a ton of sense to me as well. Just I can envision Chris Olave being a Philadelphia Eagle. I don't know what it is. It just seems like it would make sense.
Yeah.
Devontae Smith and Chris Olave are very, very similar players. They are legit. Like my legit comparison for Chris Olave is Devontae Smith. So those two guys running the same type of routes and the same type of scheme, same type of offense would make some sense. Because sometimes you want diversity and variety in the type of wide receivers you have. But we've seen with Ohio State this year, Garrett Wilson, Jackson Smith and Jigba, and Chris Olave, they're all kind of similar. And it can work if you have, similar type of wide receivers on the same team that can all get open, catch the ball, and be consistent from that perspective.
I will say, though, from an NFL fit, yeah, I like it. You're getting another separator. You're getting another smooth route runner, a nuanced route runner there for Jalen Hurts. But I will say, from a fantasy standpoint, if you love Chris Olave as the prospect, landing in Philly with already a lower volume passing offense to begin with, also competing with guys like Dallas Goedert and Devontae Smith, yeah, he's going to fall probably to where he's now, a late first round type of pick. I can see him falling to like the early second area.
Yeah. So as of right now, I view Chris Olave as like the 107, 108. Because I'm, a little bit higher, I would say, than most people on Chris Olave.
Yep.
For my rankings, he'd fall, definitely below Jameson Williams, based on where he went, and maybe, even below Jahan Dotson, where I'll talk about where he went as well. And Treylon Burks, obviously, Garrett Wilson and Drake London would stay ahead of him at wide receiver. So again, Kenny Pickett, they have going to the New Orleans Saints. I think, again, good fit for Kenny Pickett. I don't know how in on him I would be from a rookie draft
cost standpoint,
because I just really don't think Kenny Pickett is a high ceiling fantasy quarterback. I don't think he's a high ceiling NFL quarterback either, based on what I watched. I've watched, 5 full games, all 22 of Kenny Pickett. I just think the guy's being overvalued in a bad quarterback class. That's just my opinion. Again, if you want more information on that, dropped his tail of the tape yesterday. Number 20, though, we do see Malik Willis come off the board. He would be quarterback 1 pretty easily because in this mock draft, only him and Kenny Pickett were first-round quarterbacks. It's no secret that Pittsburgh likes Malik Willis. It is absolutely zero. It would be zero surprise to anybody if Malik Willis was a Pittsburgh Steeler, whether at pick 20 or if they had to trade up and get him. So this makes a lot of sense. We've kind of already covered this fit before, but what do you think of, Malik Willis to the Steelers?
Yeah, I mean, I love it. I love everything they're trying to do there in Pittsburgh. I love the weapons arsenal that they have, and I trust that organization to be able to functionally support Malik Willis if they decided to make this investment on him. So yeah, I'm all in here. Obviously, we know from a fantasy standpoint, the Konami code of Malik Willis, what he represents from an arm talent standpoint, from a mobility standpoint. I mean, this could be a guy that if he ends up starting year one, which I mean, maybe they view Trubisky as that bridge for him. They want him to be the guy in year two. But as soon as this guy starts a full season, we could see top 5 legitimate upside from a fantasy perspective.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think Malik Willis in Pittsburgh, yeah, their offensive line isn't the greatest, but they're the Pittsburgh Steelers. They've been able to build offensive lines in the past. They've been able to, make good like any quarterback that Pittsburgh has drafted or really had in recent years, other than, we got Ben and Terry Bradshaw. They've only had like 4 quarterbacks in the history of their franchise, it seems like. So there's a reason that they've been so successful. I trust them to be able to build their offensive line and build the team around Malik Willis and make him a great fantasy quarterback as a result. New England, again, Jameson Williams, same pick, same fit. Makes a lot of sense to me. Field stretcher for Mac Jones. We're moving on to the Buffalo Bills. 25th overall, they would take a Jahan Dotson. Now, this is a different fit. Jahan Dotson, I do think, will be a first-round wide receiver based on the opinions of both of these guys. I know Mel Kiper is huge on Jahan Dotson. He loves Jahan Dotson. I think NFL teams are going to love Jahan Dotson as well because of the separation ability. He has the Kadarius Toney look to his game, like what we saw last year, who was also a first-round wide receiver. And Jahan Dotson in Buffalo would be, I got to admit, a great fit and a great, replacement in the slot for Cole Beasley or on the outside for, what they had with John Brown and, Emmanuel Sanders.
I think this would be, I mean, I know there's going to be Gabe Davis truthers coming out my head, but I think you make Crowder your full-time slot and you have these guys interchangeable as, your other outside wide receiver to complement Stephon Diggs. That's how I think that they would operate these guys. They would have Jahan Dotson and they would have Gabe Davis kind of intervaling depending on, what type of looks the defense is giving him. Obviously, if the deeper portion of the field is more open, you have a guy like Jahan Dotson who's a more fluid type of athlete. And then with Gabe Davis, obviously we know what he's able to do from a contested type of situation just from that KC game alone. So that would be very interesting. We're already low on Gabe Davis, but I can't wait for Gabe Davis truthers to make the case for Gabe Davis if this were to happen.
Yeah, adding 2 wide receivers, one of them being a first rounder, would probably not be great news for Gabe Davis. But yeah, Jahan Dotson, man, like this would be a situation where we would have an overvalued wide receiver, I'd presume, just because being attached to Josh Allen, it's got to, come with a lot of
the McCole Hardman effect.
Yeah, it's the McCole Hardman effect. People still believe in McCole Hardman because he's Patrick Mahomes' wide receiver too. Jahan Dotson would have that stigma around him too. It's a good stigma to have, but he'd probably be a top 10 pick in Superflex rookie drafts, guaranteed, if not even higher potentially.
I can't take him in the top 10, but I can definitely see his ADP settling around there.
Yeah, like I'm comfortable taking him, 110, 111, 112 area if this were to happen and this is how everything materialized. But if you're telling me I got to take this guy like 7th overall or 6th overall because he went to Buffalo, I don't know, man. I have question marks about the prospect, and I like some of the other wide receiver prospects better.
Well, I can say it right now. If this exact scenario happened and Jameson Williams was on the Patriots and Jahan Dotson was on the Bills, I know for a fact that Jahan Dotson would probably be going above Jameson, but I would rather Jameson Williams.
Well, yeah, and this might be an unpopular take, but Chris Olave on Philadelphia, I would still take over Jahan Dotson on Buffalo.
Yeah,
and maybe you wouldn't take that because I think you're a little bit lower on Chris Olave than I am, but Chris Olave to me is just a much better prospect, so I would take Chris Olave over him, even though the wide receiver landing spot debate has always been long talked about. But wide receivers, it does matter less than other positions, 100%, because all you have to do as a wide receiver is get open and catch the ball, and you're going to be productive for fantasy. You have nothing to do with how good your offensive line is, and whatever the case, as long as you're on the field running routes, getting open and catching the ball, that's all you can control, and that'll help you be valuable for fantasy, regardless of how good your offense is, how good your quarterback is, what your scheme is, coaching staff, whatever.
For sure. So we actually have the final 3 offensive skill position, the final 3 landing spots to discuss on this video. And we'll start with 27 with your Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And again, I'm assuming this mock was most likely made prior to the Leonard Fournette re-signing. If you guys don't know that news, 3 years with $21 million for Leonard Fournette to come back to Tampa. Mel Kiper actually had Tampa taking Breece Hall. And although I think there's a very, very slim chance that happens, let's just go over a nightmare scenario in fantasy. If Breece Hall and Leonard Fournette would have to share a backfield.
Yeah, that wouldn't be great. I would say, so knowing what I know about the Bucs and Mike Greenberg and how they structure contracts, there'd probably be an out with minimal dead money after 1 year of Leonard Fournette. So it probably wouldn't be a death sentence for Breece Hall. But again, 1 year with Leonard Fournette means that's also probably only 1 year with Tom Brady for Breece Hall. And if Tom Brady only plays 1 more year and Breece Hall was in Tampa Bay at pick 27, then you're probably missing that year that you'd want Breece Hall in Tampa Bay for with Tom Brady as the quarterback. So it would be a very nightmarish scenario, but thankfully, I do not think this will happen. I think the Bucs are more likely to go into your offensive line, into your defensive line, secondary potentially, or even, another position like wide receiver over a running back in the first round. They're probably going to take a running back at some point because they just have Leonard Fournette and Keyshawn Vaughn under contract and on their roster, but I expect them to take a Zonovan Knight in 4th round or,
James
Brian Robinson in the 3rd round or something. Like they're going to take somebody in the 3rd to 5th to 6th round range. They're not going to take a 1st or a 2nd round running back. I don't think, at least.
Do you think it's more likely they replace the Ronald Jones role or the Giovanni Bernard role in that backfield?
I think it's probably more likely they replace the Ronald Jones role.
So more of like that prototypical first, second down between the tackles.
So yeah. I would love Tyler Algier in the 3rd round. I would love, like I said, Zonovan Knight in like the 4th round. He's more of like a change of pace type of back too. Keyshawn Vaughn improved last year too. So it wouldn't shock me if they just like signed another veteran and just rolled with Keyshawn Vaughn as the number 2 back there also.
Yep. No, that's definitely fair. So overall, I mean, we do see Breece Hall in Tampa Bay, and we'll go over this next player and
again. The important thing to remember about both of these mock drafts is that Breece Hall was in the 1st round of both of them. That's the important thing to remember. Whether he goes to Tampa Bay, Buffalo, whatever team, maybe a team trades up back into the 1st round to get the extra 5th-year option on a running back, which would be important. Which the Pittsburgh Steelers, I'm sure, are going to take advantage of with Najee Harris. Then, Breece Hall being a 1st round pick, it might not be a team that picks at the back of the 1st round. It might be a team like the Jets, like the Texans, like the whatever team picks at the end or the early 2nd round, getting back into the 1st round to get and secure their running back.
Well, let me just run you through the scenario. Like if it was indeed Tampa Bay and these were the other landing spots of the top other rookies, where would Breece Hall be in your rookie rankings?
I don't like this question. I'd probably take Malik Willis over him at 101.
I take the 2 receivers.
Take Breece Hall 102.
I would take London and I would take Burks, and he'd be my 104.
Yeah, I really hope we don't have to deal with this scenario, but
hopefully
it would all be close and all relative. Those top 5 players are all, within a tier of each other. So yeah, if you wanted to take the receivers over Breece Hall, if you went to Tampa Bay and we were probably delayed a year of his production, then I don't blame you.
For sure. And I mean, speaking of the next landing spot, 28th overall, Green Bay Packers select Treylon Burks. I mean, it's really a no-brainer for me that we know, obviously, this wide zone scheme, this wide zone system that LaFleur has in place in Green Bay. Now you get I actually think inarguably the best after-the-catch wide receiver in this draft with Treylon Burks. You're adding to that system, that quick strike system, that system that encourages and inhibits a lot of yards after catch type of production. Like, along with freaking Aaron Rodgers throwing him the ball. Like, yeah, this would be tough to say. Again, I would prefer London because of the 4th overall versus 28th overall discrepancy. But, I mean, I think this would locked and loaded make Treylon Burks a top 3 Superflex rookie pick for me.
Yeah, this would be interesting. Him and Breece Hall would be a real conversation for sure. And having Treylon Burks in Green Bay, like, I don't have to explain myself. Like, it's Aaron Rodgers throwing to Treylon Burks. Like, it would definitely work out. I would say he'd probably be the safest pick of the top 5 too, just because he has the security of the quarterback, the talent value, player, obviously, and all that stuff. So, I really like that fit. If that happens, I'm sure people are going to get crazy and take him 101 in this scenario.
I could definitely see it, which is, I wouldn't be complaining about the scenario as at all for a guy that has a lot of draft capital in multiple leagues, because this is just like music to my ears apart from Breece Hall, which we already addressed is very unlikely. So either way, let's move off of Treylon Burks, the final pick of the 1st round and of the skill positions of this mock draft with Mel Kiper. Detroit going with Matt Corral.
Yeah, Matt Corral is going to be an interesting guy to follow because I do feel like Matt Corral is going to see a rise of some kind. He is currently performing at his pro day right now. I haven't been following it, but if he's doing well right now, I'm sure there's going to be some buzz around his name. The biggest question for him was he going to be healthy? Because at the combine, he didn't really do much. He didn't, run his 40 but he was doing interviews and team stuff, which is what the combine is for the most part anyway. So I'm sure teams have a higher view of Matt Corral than the media right now. At least that's the way I look at it. And if Matt Corral is going to be a first round quarterback, then we're probably only going to hear about it closer to the draft. And people might call him like a late riser, even though he's probably been that way the whole time with NFL teams. And 32 to Detroit would be a fantastic fit for Matt Corral's skill set. Matt Corral is the type of guy, much like Kenny Pickett, that needs to go to like a New Orleans, Detroit type of system where he can, have a lot of easy throws. He has a better arm, I would say, than Kenny Pickett, but he doesn't have Sam Howell and Malik Willis's, arm talent and athleticism combination. But I do think going to Detroit at 32 overall would firmly make him, a back end of the first round rookie pick for me.
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking about this scenario, this is a first round rookie quarterback. And what I've kind of mentioned as a good nest for Malik Willis landing in, well, guess what? I mean, Matt Corral would technically even have a better nest because they would be using that second overall pick to add to this team. And when it comes to Matt Corral, I mean, if he landed in Detroit, I mean, you're talking about Hawkinson, you're talking about Swift, you're talking about Amon-Ra, all guys that do a lot of their damage in short game. And obviously with Matt Corral, the biggest gripe on him is the fact that he was a more RPO timing-based type of system going over at Ole Miss. This would be one of the nests that has an abundance of playmakers that fit that mold to a T.
Yeah, and you also have a deep threat in DJ Chark. I'm sure they'd add, a receiving talent of some point on day two to help Matt Corral out. If you added George Pickens to this receiving core, Christian Watson or something like that in the early second round, then suddenly you got, a really good offense with a good offensive line, a coaching staff that showed us a ton their first season with a horrible team last year. I think Matt Corral would be in for, a great, futures as a pro. I would definitely take him over Kenny Pickett. That's for sure. Easily. New Orleans, Kenny Pickett versus Detroit, Matt Corral, despite the, 14 pick discrepancy in where they got drafted, I would easily take Matt Corral over Kenny Pickett.
Yep. No, I fully agree. I just think he's a better player than Pickett at this point as well. And I'm sure you would have a lot more context on that doing the tail of the tape on Pickett, which
and Corral will be the next one that I do. So that'll probably be coming either this weekend or next week.
For sure, which is exciting. But if you guys have made it this far, about 36 minutes deep into this mock draft reactions video, comment down below in each of these mocks who your favorite landing spot is amongst these rookies. Not your top rookie who's going to be your first pick off the board, but the one that intrigues you the most compared to what we kind of have been hearing in this cycle thus far.
I'm sure Buffalo Breece Hall is going to be the answer for
100%.
most people. But I think my favorite fit of either of these mocks is Arizona Treylon Burks. I think that one's like the coolest fit for me because I haven't seen it very often, and I think it would make a ton of sense. That's my favorite fit of these, and I do also really like Jameson Williams to New England.
Yep, for sure.
Yep. All right. So if you guys did enjoy this video, like Danny mentioned, like, comment, subscribe, check out the Patreon, check out underdogfantasy.com, promo code FSE. That'll get you access to our Dynasty Rankings Manifesto. Peace out, guys. We'll talk to you soon.